Hey guys, how's it going? Marcelo here, and this is a pretty interesting topic. This is a follow-up to the last discussion video I did where I mentioned I was going to do a video on this, and here we are. I don't even really have much material for this video. I kind of do, but the opener is something I knew I was going to have some trouble with. Like I said in the last discussion video, I did watch the Kind of Funny on, it was from Kind of Funny. It was the P.S. I Love You podcast on whether or not Naughty Dog should return to Jak and Daxter. And they said no, because it would not make sense for Naughty Dog to do that since they've grown so much. And if you guys didn't know it, I'm pretty sure if you're huge Naughty Dog fans, you have to know this at this point. Neil Druckmann was the head of a Jak 4 project. It never took off because they were smart about it. They didn't just make it and put it out there, and whether it sucked or not, hey, it's Jak and Daxter, you know the name, you're going to buy the game, and we don't care if it sucks or not, we made the game, it's the way it is, they're redesigned heavily, who cares, the aesthetics are a lot different than the other games, they were going to be more photorealistic, and Jak was supposed to look like a real ass human. They scrapped it, which was a smart move because the more they were developing this project, they realized, hold on, is this something that we're doing for us because we want to see this franchise return, or are we doing this for the fans, or what? Are we just doing this to make money, or where's the passion behind the project? Now, I'm not saying that they didn't have any passion at all. It's just that the effort and the way they were going into this project was not faithful to the other games. It didn't look so faithful only because of the drastic redesigns and all that stuff. So they canned it. They were like, yeah, we're just gonna create an original IP, and that's when Last of Us came out. So that project kind of turned into Last of Us. But the question's always been there, and as we're speculating right now, will Naughty Dog have something to do with Crash again after that Easter egg in Uncharted 4? Or could they possibly resurrect the Jak 4 project, but go this time a little more faithful to the cartoony art style of the past games, or what? A lot of people are saying no. I understand why. Oh, I perfectly understand why. It's like I'm shocked that people don't want them to return to these franchises. I get it. The thing is, should they? Not, we want them to. I mean, I do kind of want them to, but should they? Is this a good move? This is something that one of the guys from Naughty Dog even said when asked, like in 2013 or something, if they would ever return to Crash. They said it's never off the table because they still have people that worked on those games at the studio, as evidenced by the Boulders Easter egg. But would it be a good move for them? You already know my answer. I think yes. Because the gaming industry, once again, is changing. We've got Ratchet & Clank that came out just like a month ago, and it's doing phenomenal. I'm gonna stop singing Ratchet & Clank's praises soon. Trust me, I'm not gonna bring it up in every platformer-related video I do from here on out, but it's a really good example. This is something we've been waiting for and been wanting. Insomniac, you would think this of Insomniac. Well, they've matured past the Ratchet & Clanks and past the Spyros and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, Sunset Overdrive still has like a kind of wacky, crazy humor, but it's got more realistic characters. It's set in a more realistic setting, and it's just their comedic spin on the zombie apocalypse, motif. But they're trying to tell more grittier. Insomniac always had the more gut attitude, kind of approach to their games, and Naughty Dog started with that and grew into just this more mature, we're telling some legit straight up narratives and all that. That's the direction they went, which is completely fine. Now, I used to not be one to jump so quickly onto those kinds of games, but after watching Last of Us and having Caleb pounded into my head that he loves Last of Us and we did our Sweden films and all that, I grew a huge ass appreciation for that game. It's an amazing game. I have the thing right there, the little small poster. It's well made. It's Naughty Dog, so you know that they're gonna put a lot of passion into it. So whenever they're not feeling the passion, when trying to return to a franchise or what have you, they're gonna can it because they don't want to do their fans wrong. And if they return to like Jak and Daxter or to Crash, I feel that would be a good move because the industry needs it. And like I said before, the industry back then didn't really see these kinds of games. You know, Crash and Spyro were the start of what we have today. Not just those ones, but those are the ones I'm bringing up in the platformer genre. We wouldn't have Mario freaking Sunshine. I know that was like early 2000s. We wouldn't have like Galaxy or something if 64 didn't take off. And what was it doing right there? Competing with Crash and Spyro and all of them. And all of those games, yes, to some degree Mario 64, is what launched the 3D platformer genre into the right direction. I'm not sure if that's right the way you guys are seeing it, but for me it's right. But I mean, if Naughty Dog returned to Jak and Daxter, that'd be cool. Now, here's another thing, here's another layer to it. Neil Druckmann and them weren't exactly, Neil was part of like Jak 2 and 3 as a programmer. He didn't really get into the front seat, the director's seat, until Last of Us. And I'm pretty sure he also worked on Uncharted, all the Uncharteds at some point. Again, as a programmer, I think that's what it was. Or a couple of the Uncharteds, until finally he got to direct Last of Us, and then he and Bruce Straley directed Uncharted 4. Point being, Andy Gavin, Jason Rubin, all of the older guys that were there worked on Jak and Daxter, created Jak and Daxter. So Neil and them didn't really have a whole lot to do with it besides they did some programming. So it made sense when they were starting to do Jak 4 and it just wasn't working out. That could have been a number of things, but I kind of like to think that it was because they weren't part of that original team, like the part of the original team with the ideas, with the vision, with, you know, the concepts and all that. Anyone can try and be faithful, but unless you're one of the original guys, you're not really going to hit that mark to a T. There will always be differences. Even if it's something like, who the hell did it? Now, I think G-Man and I talked about Sly 4. I think that was done by someone different. I don't think it was done by Sucker Punch. I don't know how that game turned out, but I'm willing to bet it's not exactly like the other games, which were all done by Sucker Punch. Now that's I'm just throwing that out there. I have no clue if I'm even right or wrong, but I'd be willing to bet if I played that game and played the other games, because I'm still like halfway to Sly 2. But if I beat the other games and then came to the fourth game, I'm willing to bet that it's going to be pretty faithful to that art style and all of that, because I think it's still cel shaded. It's just that there might be, unless they got some of the writers and all that from the past games, there might be like a shift in tone or in feel. Okay, how about this? Uncharted, the first three had this particular feel and what have you. Uncharted 4 has more, there's some Last of Us, there's some really heavy Last of Us influence in Uncharted 4. Why is that? New directors. So, with that being said, you know, I say that a lot, I should stop saying that, but with that being said, if they returned to Jak and Daxter or Crash, they would need to do it in a way to where it is faithful to what, you know, if it's a reboot for Crash or if it's a Jak 4 for Jak, regardless, it would have to still be faithful to the past works. But if the point of this video is if they return to that, I don't think it's a bad move like everyone says it is. I think it's an opportunity to show that you have variety, you know, within your company, you make your games. It's kind of like, do I really want to make this analogy? It's kind of like Activision with Call of Duty. The more you have of the same kind of thing that you can do, not the fact that it's a shooter, not the fact of whatever, if it's the same kind of game, or just the fact that it's the same kind of tone, the same kind of style, the same kind of gameplay, the same kind of whatever, over and over, it's going to get stale. Now, if Naughty Dog did that, made like a Last of Us 2 and then some other new IP that had Last of Us and Uncharted influence, and they kept going that route with the more darker, grittier, mature, narrative-driven games, I don't know how that would pan out, because that's just grasping for straws. I have no idea. They're Naughty Dog. We trust them. We've known this company for 20 years. For some people who grew up with their past stuff before Crash, 30 years. Back when they were Jam Mat Studios or whatever, you know? Who knows that piece of trivia? But point being, we trust these kinds of companies that have this mentality, that think this way, that make good games, because they care about the quality and they care about the fans. So, not that they're just gonna keep going, here's Crash, no. Here's Crash, no. Jak, no. Like, they're not having that mentality towards those games. It's just that the way they've evolved, it's a good, I wouldn't call it this, but it's a good excuse to not do those games because they've grown. We know they've grown, we've played their games, and they're still really awesome, and they've gained new fans and kept a lot of the old ones from the Crash and Jak days, but we've all matured with them, and they're maturing, and that's really cool. But now look at Insomniac. They figured, we want to return, something in there, something sparked in the mind of that company saying, we want to return to this. We want to see this come back. And we're the ones that know how to do it. If you're talking about Ratchet & Clank, we made Ratchet & Clank, we know how to do it. So they did it. And it did fucking amazing. So, the industry is changing. And with that change comes colorful games again, 3D platformers again, action games again, that kids can really get into, and older fans of that genre can get into. So they need to come back. And like I said before, it would be in the best interest of fans of the industry, of everything, if those specific franchises, if that's what you want to do, not just make new IPs that are 3D platformers or what have you. If you're gonna bring old franchises back, it would only make sense to have the original people be the ones to bring them back. They know them best. They created them, So, I've speculated a whole bunch on what would happen if Naughty Dog brought Crash back. What would happen if this and this and this? But would that even be a good move to begin with? I, for one, say yes. Because we need this. If they're going to bring the old franchises back, they should be the ones to do it. I'm not saying that Naughty Dog is going to go on and create a whole new IP of a cartoon character. If they did that, I don't know how people will react. Probably very negatively, because a lot of people will disagree with me in saying that they should go back to something like Jak and Daxter and Crash. So for Naughty Dog to create a whole, that's a risk. Now that's a risk. If you really take a look at Naughty Dog's story and listen to Jason and Andy's interviews from back then, every single project, every new IP, even with Crash, was a huge ass risk. They had no idea if it was going to work or not. They were afraid if it didn't work. They had the passion and everything was there. They never got overzealous and was like, this is going to make us millions. And no, they had no fucking clue how it was going to turn out. With Crash, it was their first full leap into 3D, so they had no clue how that was going to turn out. Well, as it turns out, it did well. It did extremely well. Then they went on to Jak and Daxter, and they're like, well, shit, now it's a new console, now it's new hardware, now it's new stuff. How is this going to happen? They didn't want to do a whole go to a level, go to a level, go to a level. It was supposed to be all interconnected with no loading times. No game has really done that. To this scale of a 3D game with no loading times between going to worlds, never been done before. They did it. It fucking turned out well. Then with the thing is with Naughty Dog, there was that huge ass shift in staff and employment in teams, because then just pretty much right there after Jak and Daxter, boom, the kid games were done, and then Jason and Andy left and all that stuff happened. Now it's Uncharted, codenamed Project Big, because this was a big project, more realistic, more grittier, narrative, they were gonna have, it was gonna be story driven. And they were freaking scared. They had no idea if it was gonna do good or not. And it did. So, then Neil came on board and they did Last of Us. They were freaking afraid. They straight up was like, I think this is the one true bomb. The failure of Naughty Dog is this game right here. Fucking amazing ass game. So, not to say they need to take that risk one more time and make a platformer again. A new platformer or something. Not to say that. But, yes, it would be a big risk at this point to go back to something like Jak or Crash. But if they did, they would know how to do it best by getting the right people on board. Maybe Neil just wasn't the right guy to direct Jak 4. Since he knows how to do the more realistic, grittier stuff, well, it worked for him doing Last of Us, it worked for him doing Uncharted 4. I don't think it would have done well if they did release Jak 4 the way they wanted to, with this more grittier looking art style, with Jak looking like an actual human, Daxter looking like severely animalistic, like, I don't know, like, people will kind of take a step back and go, wait, why did they decide to do it this way, But maybe you just need the right people there to really do it. Like, they didn't just overhaul Crash's design or the feel of the game in that Easter egg for Uncharted 4. They made it super freaking, like, I played that Easter egg and even the controls feel kind of like they did in the first Crash game. They got it pretty spot on. And with them saying from back then, now here's where we can kind of catch them here with this. They said they have people who worked on those games still in the studio. They just did a Crash Easter egg in Uncharted 4, and it feels and looks and sounds and controls exactly like it did. So with that being said, why not get those guys and some other people to reboot the franchise, if that's what we're going to talk about with Crash, or to go back to Jak and Daxter. You can make it work. Don't be afraid to do it. Just because the industry has changed and there's the more grittier game. If, like I said before, Naughty Dog and Insomniac have such a close freaking tight-knit relationship. There's no way they can't know what's going on with their buddies next door, metaphorically. But, well, one time that was literal, because when they started, Insomniac and Naughty Dog were like literally in the same building. That's pretty cool. But, I digress. They had to have, they have to know that Insomniac went back to Ratchet & Clank and did amazing. So why would they not want to, is it because of the whole rights thing with Activision? Is it because it's Activision? Like, you can't just keep saying, well, we want to keep doing the games that we're doing, because that's cool. But like I said, if you don't get fresh ideas, fresh things every single time, and it's not, if it starts to turn out like the art style and if it's always Neil, unless he really knows how to like do a thing different, do something else different, do something else different with like new IPs or a Last of Us 2 or 3 or whatever, unless he does something different every time, it's gonna get kind of samey. And again, even if Naughty Dog did samey, which they did with all the past Crash games, all the past Jak games, even all the past Uncharted games, they kind of feel samey, but every experience has something new to offer. Every game in those franchises, every game has something new to offer. Every IP has something new to offer. Now, if you go back to an old IP, with how much you've grown as a company, with your storytelling, with your characters, with the graphical stuff you can do, with everything, you can breathe new life into it and give it a new experience and make it something different once more. Now, again, if they went to just a whole new IP and said, here's Plucky the Chicken, our new IP, that's not gonna work. I don't think it would really work, because it's too drastically. Now, I can't really say that, because look at what I just explained. After Jak was Uncharted. Again, it was a new staff, and all that, and lots of new staff, a whole new team, but that was a big risk, only because they wanted to shift their focus completely away from cartoon stuff, now onto realistic stuff. So what I'm trying to propose is that they kind of start weaving in the cartoon stuff yet again, because it can show that they still care about, they can do it in a way, because Jak was not just like Crash, where it was like, the story is like whatever, but the gameplay, the gameplay was cool. But Jak did have a story you can digest, that you can kind of get into, whereas Crash had a very, very simple plot amongst all the games, So, I don't know. If they went back to like Jak, then they can really take what they've learned from Uncharted and Last of Us with the storytelling and all of that, and try to interject a little bit more of that back into Jak, because Jak was already the start of the whole story-driven thing for Naughty Dog. But now that they've kind of, perfected, I guess, their own formula of storytelling, then they can do that with Jak. If they went back to Crash, it would kind of have to revert to that old formula of, I would rather have not a story-driven Crash, but a gameplay-driven Crash, because that's how they did it, and they did it best that way. That's just kind of inevitable, like in my opinion. If they did like a story-driven, well, Crash is gonna go dark and gritty, like, I don't know. Like even the fan film is kind of starting to feel a little. We're not gonna make it dark and gritty. It'll have emotional moments, but but a Crash game, like a Crash reboot, would have to be upbeat and happy and wacky and just zany like the old days, like the Crashes of the old days. Not with the satirical humor and pop culture referencing humor that it just developed once, Radical and Sierra took the stage with Crash. So, should, I kind of get it. Like, you want to bring something back, but you don't know if it's a good move, and you don't know how you're even going to begin doing it. Because I've talked about old works before as well. Like, I'm not trying to compare myself to anyone. I'm just saying, like, I kind of get it. With debating whether or not to go back to something you've done before, or whatever the case is. But I say do it. I say go ahead and take that risk one more time. It's not like you're creating Plucky the Chicken, a whole new IP. You're going back to a previous work you've done before. You didn't abandon it. You've said time and time again that you're not abandoning those franchises. You're acknowledging they were there and that they did their job. And some people right then and there would argue, why don't you just leave it alone then? Let it be. Let it just do whatever. Well, what if you want to remind people of the good days of platforming and of gaming? Because Crash defined gaming right there with Mario for the longest time in the 90s. Crash was everywhere. And to bring back an icon that big in today's age, it's going to be hard because of how much hell that character went through and that franchise went through with everyone's reactions to all the games that came out after Naughty Dog versus something like Mario, where it's always been Nintendo keeping a tight, really tight, I don't even know how to describe it, really close eye on their property as they made their games and made sure they didn't let anyone else do it, except if it was a spin-off. For the main Mario platforming games, they really, really made sure, okay, well, we're doing these games and, whatever. But Mario's always been like the same for the most part, since it's Nintendo, always Nintendo who makes the Mario games. But with Crash, it's completely different because it's been so many people working on the games. So where do you go from there when like 4 or 5 companies have left their mark on a single franchise? Like, where do you go from there? Well, if these teases are kind of saying what we think they're saying, especially with the whole Uncharted 4 thing that's been happening, what if Naughty Dog did buy back the rights to Crash and decide they want to do something new and return to that franchise in the same way Insomniac did with Ratchet and Clank? I don't think it's a bad move. I've rambled on for long enough. My conclusion, the TLDR to this video is, I don't think it's a bad move, like everyone else seems to think so. Not everyone else. There's a group there who wants Naughty Dog to return to Crash or Jak, but it's not a bad move the way everyone else says that it is. I don't think so. If you're gonna want a really diverse portfolio of your work, and they have it in spades, but it'd be cool to be like, sometime down the road, if they were like, yeah, so when we first started, we did such and such and such and such. Then we became Naughty Dog and we worked on Crash. Oh, well, after that, we also did Jak and Daxter, and then Uncharted, which was a huge, risk for us, but it came out really good. And then we did Last of Us. We returned to Uncharted one last time. After that, we decided, you know what, I think it's the right time for the industry to be able to do platforming again, and we went back to Crash, or we went back to Jak and Daxter. Like, if they were to be able to say that, like 10, 20 years longer down the road, I don't know, that sounds kind of cool. It sounds neat. It sounds like something that they would do, Like, what really is, like, think about it, what really would be the next IP after Uncharted, after Last of Us? Like, what else would they do? If they had to create a whole new IP and they didn't do Last of Us 2, really think, like, what else would they do? What do you think they would do? As a company who have worked on cartoonish games in the past and are known more for, like, their more modern, grittier, story-driven games, would they do another story-driven game, or do you think they would see how gaming is starting to change again and we're starting to get platformers back and they were like, we did that a long time ago, I think we can do it again? I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on this? I want to know what you guys think about this. Do you think that it's a good move for them to return to something like Jak or Crash, or not? Should they just keep doing more grittier games? Because Naughty Dog doing the grittier games is cool, because they don't just make it filth. they make good gritty games. It's just that for those who aren't so into the gritty games, or even just, I don't know, for those wishing that they would return to something like Crash or Jak, when everyone else is starting to make, colorful platforming games again, I think that'd be cool. I for one think that would be cool. So, that being said, I'm Marcelo. I'll see you guys later, and take care.